Well, while fans doing that, I think we should applaud these two for being in the top 10 nations.
Sounds about right.
Just so you know.
You guys, thanks, but you didn't need to do that, boy.
Don't act like you're not used to walking into rooms full of flawless men.
Cool. Yep. Good.
The resolution determined hard means the affirmative sports defendant topical fiat policy officer versus intentionally functionally defended policy officer, or the steps going to be evaluated on the basis of policy implementation. Again, our interpretation of the resolution determined hard means that the affirmative is enforced to defend the intentionally for a topical fiat policy officer versus the intentionally functionally defended policy officer, or the steps going to be evaluated on the basis of policy implementation. Ace point is grabbed always when the principle of accuracy is good. In the abstract, the only way we can debate them effectively is that they're forced to defend the merits of the political implementation. The piece of point is that intentional competition and functional competition surely we don't have to debate against ourselves and put an issue because fairness. The piece of point is predictability, infinite number of possible representations creatively developed. In 20 minutes, no way we can develop sufficiently terms. In 7 minutes without the internet, the season points that occupy movement proofs without analyzing the fiat implications. Your movement will never really play. Season points solve all your offense, so you can read criticisms, just have to defend the implications. Background, first argument is that diplomatic engagement can happen on different levels in the 60s. The United States gaining people in diplomacy with China by swapping players on the teams. The second argument is that the United States also changed exchange payments with China. The third argument is that gun vote diplomacy also happened. The fourth argument is that the State Department defines diplomatic engagement as the practice of construction between the United States and foreign publics with communication and/or international aid, which is why we have the plan. The United States federal government should substantially increase, or the United States State Department should increase its diplomatic engagement with Venezuela by allocating $100 million of the USAID budget by providing mobile water filtration and purification systems to Venezuela. The United States Department of State should increase its diplomatic engagement with Venezuela by allocating $100 million of USAID budget by providing mobile water filtration and purification systems to Venezuela. You got a question? Cool.
A copy of your framework text.
Not getting it. Advantage one is water. First argument is uniqueness. A is that there's access to water is decreasing the status quo. BBC report in March 7th indicate that 80% of people in Venezuela are impacted by not having water, and there's water everywhere. However, the problem is that 70% of the water in Venezuela is not acceptable for human consumption, and diseases are on the rise. 20,000 children die in Venezuela every year due to waterborne illness, and this affects these effects also impact the elderly who are uniquely vulnerable to plants. All because motor filtration systems are good and purifying water, and they allow the recyclization of water to filter. It's 99.9% cleaner than most water in the United States. The impact is thirst. First argument is 30,000 people die each year, and that's the most dehumanizing impact because you literally feel your body shut down internally. Also disease vectors. The WTO report in 2011 indicates that waterborne illness is the most likely scenario for superbug. Congressional testimony indicates that in 1 year it's likely that more than 2 billion people die as a result of superbug. Also extinction as a result of us not being able to develop quarantine fast enough. Advantage 2 is leadership. Ace point is the uniqueness. Yeah.
Who's producing the water filters, and what is the process by which
USAID uses multiple water filtration systems. That's the term of USAID uses. Advantage 2 is leadership. Ace point is the uniqueness. Latin American leadership is declining in the status quo. First argument is Obama is particularly failed in Latin America. Colombia proves this fact that he's tried to change military policy, but the Supreme Court ruled that Obama's policies were unconstitutional, struck it down, and also Obama's support for Honduran leaders also caused backlash. And Cuba arguments indicate that, or Cuba's stance also proves that back the United States tried to start a new beginning with Cuba, but the lack of leadership did not allow that to happen. Also, the United States image is being tarnished as a result of the drug war in Latin America, and now's the key time because there's a power vacuum in Latin America as a result of China's dying, and the United States leadership looks weak right now because they just kicked out our diplomats. The plan solves this stage. The point is it increases the perception of the rest of Latin America that we're willing to reach out to people who we've been historically stayed in office with in the past, and encourages cooperation with other countries who the United States has bad history with. Also, it changes the perception of the United States that indicates that we're no longer invested in only military dominance or preserving the American empire, i.e. Venezuela is only good for oil, rather than we are now concerned about the people. The United States perception is key to checking Hezbollah, and Iran is key to checking Hezbollah. Iran is increasing influence in Latin America and fueling Hezbollah. United States leadership is key to generating intelligence sharing and international cooperation to do things like stop Hezbollah. The impact is that this changes the Hezbollah narrative. The reason why Hezbollah is gaining influence in Iran is because the United States is seen as an empire that does not care about people who plan to change the backs. The United States should take the lead on human rights abuses. Hezbollah is inevitably going to use a chemical weapon attacking the status quo because of ideological responses against the United States. Bioterrorism is the impact. It internalizes the distinction result of us not being able to quarantine these things, and it outweighs all the scenarios for nuclear war happens in May much larger, faster, and empirically proven that the nuclear war is a constitution result of beginning its whole underview. First argument, the plan is not to elect elections. Ace of points, diplomatic age is not. The diplomatic age wouldn't be given in 30 days. It would be huge blunder. There's no way the population would see it. The piece of point is that Venezuelan population not going to be swayed by water issues internal. Diplomatic agreements will outweigh. The piece of point is that agency politics will not be perceived. Our arguments that the State Department would not have to get any clearance from the President of Venezuela, but rather would go to the Ministry of the Environment in Venezuela, which means it's all done behind closed doors. Empirical examples on USAID, and literally every country make them isolated different. So they're going to prove any of their links to their politics. They said the decent point is that there's nothing sexy about deploying the water diplomacy. There's no unique disadvantage that anyone gains from that. The second argument is that Maduro will win inevitably no matter what. Ace of points that he's leading every poll by double digits. The piece of points that come Lopez and Freeles are not going to win because they're splitting out their own bases. They're going to beat each other out. That's the piece of point is that opposition can not generate that this is a way to take money and time and strategy before you can even get this to the public or perceive it as a bad action. The decent point is that they have no money to compete with. There's no money where they're being spent massively. And the third argument is that there's no I don't know what that is. That's
I don't either.
I think we should do paper on this.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. Case 2 more.
Is there a particular order on case?
Oh, no, I do.
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah, 2, 3, and then the case starting on framework, then straight down. And then
Hey Joey, I just have a question about the, is this increased or increasing?
Let me see. United States. Yeah, it should increase its diplomatic engagement. Yeah.
AC interpretation diplomatic engagement is an engagement based on foreign policy only using diplomatic violations. The A's and a bunch of water, water purification things, by standards first that provides bidirectionality because it's necessitates historical relations sectors normally lose diplomatic trade upgrade. Also, they get extra advantage over their water. This is advantage 1 proves the abuse. Next argument is the most predictable because the flashpoint for relations was kicking out diplomacy vote for instance, various education, extra drop calories, and send voting each because great student will be target you hit offense that you wouldn't ordinarily get next. Is this ready?
No. I can't read this.
All right, then. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
Go on to the next one.
Framework, this debate runs public spaces with democratic potential. The judge should vote for which team best discuss the contest. Norms of neoliberalism. This is best for a few reasons. Neoliberalism is substrated through the inclusion of public spaces, normalizes the debate and traces us into policymakers. This is critical. This is our criticism. Impact on the argument. Next is this question of reality. Neoliberal policy. Knowledge of truth claims also confirms ideological bases. Next, the latest first argument is growth. Focus on economic growth and perpetuates neoliberal principles, reducing all such neoliberal homosoccer. Second is globalization from above. Mostly economic and social interests of the economic elite. Third argument is globalization is the new frontier network for relations between Latin American nations. I ignore Chavez's power dynamic between countries and global hegemon and diplomatic engagement. It seeks to match the true intention of neoliberal colonialization, which the hope is working for exploitation. Fourth argument is offered as diplomatic enough to link you were forcing no binary between the integration of markets already related with ghettos and global capital. The heart of darkness is within the whip face of this global relevant. The fifth argument is the capacity to pick and choose the incorporation of a network. Neoliberalism is the privilege of the empire, and the empire chooses to extract economies and let the state to form the structure where the global south is derived from the value, or derives its value from the capacity to circumvent the ruling elite. Next to the impacts first is a collective mentality. We must believe that we believe that we must save humanity by destroying part of it in order to prop the economic interest of the elite at the expense of other species and into violence, justified wars, creates extinction because there's no value to life, and no impact to death. Second argument is neoliberalism force value always through the incorporation of economic systems of individuals which are devalued at will and modified through which kills agency and all value to life next to the alternative. We're reject the affirmative as a gesture of refusal to engage in a new frontier of colonialization, neoliberalism, a neoliberal expansion through the guise of diplomacy. Again, reject the affirmative as a gesture of refusal to participate in the new frontier of colonialization, neoliberal expansion through the guise of diplomacy. There's your copy. What's your question?
So how do we promote this kill to save mentality when we're like, yo, we should not let people die of thirst?
Yeah, it's the mask of the neoliberal system. Come on, Katie.
That's a
So
mask.
obviously, first argument is the rejection solves the power of neoliberalism, comes with global acceptance. The belief that neoliberal ideologies are the only way that we can tell the current reality. Our alternative breaks down the way that we behold neoliberalism because our imagination, because the neoliberalism has no center of power, it can be constructed from many points. This unmasks the true intention of neoliberalism, which allows us to create a new epistemic foundation for policy making, globalization, proper solves because rejecting passive acceptance of global norms gives individuals the ability to actualization. See, this solves dehumanization and facilitates participation in civil society that is impossible in the world. The affirmative and fermentation fails. The fermentation justifies the liberal order in society through making us believe that this is the production of solving this is productive power. To solve problems, this makes neoliberalism worse because it masks true potential and focuses on the institution as a platform for power to source of critical thinking and agency. What's the text? Do you have this one? Info? Alright. Next, the United States Department of State should condition increasing its diplomatic engagement with Venezuela by allocating $100 million of the USAID budget to provide mobile water filtration purification systems on Venezuela's cooperation on counterterrorism efforts. Again, the United States Department of State should condition increasing its diplomatic engagement with Venezuela by allocating $100 million of its USAID budget to providing mobile water filtration and purification systems on Venezuela's cooperation on
The
counterterrorism.
status of these advocacies.
Okay. Okay. First argument is that we made text combat increases to change, increasing, which means that we are textually competitive. Also, text combat is bad because it's arbitrary, justifies moving back period, and guy and G. Also arbitrarily worse because it determines ground, because of determination of ground, because it decreases the real world mechanism for comparison for how we actually evaluate differential policy options. This means that focus on competition is good because it's a better comparison of the merits of action and forces us to defend all parts of real world action. And the salty arguments first, the Venezuela says yes, Maduro does not have the same politics as Chavez did. Around and says this is a split. Splits of Venezuelan political parties because Chavez has a strong enough character. This means that he writes more themselves one of Cornelius' main points of contention in the election. This is one of Cornelius' main points of contention in the election. The campaign allows Maduro to show that he's taking a strong action to stop corruption, which crops up. The Venezuelan public, also Venezuelan politicians, have made hay about their ability to selectively engage with the U.S. as proven by the PDVSA. Giving oil to the U.S. looks like an opportunity to make U.S. domestic action. Next is the net benefit versus democratic signaling. Certain democracy has been defined by geopolitical trends in the last 5 years in the 77 nations, where it had popularly elected governments that has now changed to 123 governments. Also, we face challenges with the growth of political freedom of democracy, and slowing most signaling in Venezuela and former USSR states. Been there backsliding in Chavez was a key figure because he enriched oil, and he was also necessary to create checks against the encirclement of power and rule of law and unfettered media attention. The links of them engaging in Venezuela creates a demand for political change, which would demonstrate the U.S.'s democratic signaling globally that following the death of Chavez, the world matched the U.S. and Venezuelan unconditional engagement would signal a step back from the U.S. commitment to democracy, and the advance of democracy is contingent on the promination of global powers and sustaining leadership in areas of human rights and democracy, which is currently the threat of political leaders succumbing to pressure. This means that while this is evaluated on a case-by-case basis with the basis of U.S. political commitments, which means that Venezuela is the litmus test that creates authoritarian backlash because the U.S. action is perceived as intentional before authoritarians who choose to crack down on people in fear of retaliation. We think democracy is good for a few reasons. First, leadership is constrained by people who leaders are constrained by people who don't want to go to war, ruin the environment, which means the population is capable of keeping us in check and stopping environmental degradation as well as conflict. Next case. First argument is that we get one political test, one theoretical test of justification. Nor what I see, this is the most real and the most holistic. You did not give us a copy of yours. You do not get a copy of ours. One policy, one theory. This is the most real world because you get attacked by the far left and the far right, and all policy discussions. Also, it's the more holistic form of education, which means that it is providing unique and traditional net benefit and functional textual competition. Do not solve all of your offense. Also, are not key to your offense means that these are not intrinsic links to the standards that you isolate or to your interpretation. Also, separate policy. We also say that we can look at policy justifications without solely looking at the political implications. Theory underpins and informs practice. That argument is made out of the K framework. Also, you are not forced to read against yourself. No more for this. And we think the predictability is determined by the strength of the links to the criticism and counterpoints. Obviously means that we are capable of meeting this. Also, VM is not key to a movement because there's no movement involved in the criticism. You don't understand how K's work. Also, definition. You say the definitions are important. Twist on the counterpoint. Next argument. Status quo is solving 100% of your ass. diplomatic pressure on the region means that they're kicking out diplomats and taking lead on things. They're not taking the lead on things like FARC and Cuban negotiations. The Asian pivot means that Latin America is not key to foreign policy in the region. Also, not key to foreign policy right now. Either Venezuela continues with currency reform, which within the context of the one signals U.S. cooperation. That Venezuela is making their market assets more protected. Their genes, or it means that Venezuela society decided to perceive as one going back and back, which stabilizes their currency, causes enormous amounts of stagflation, makes it impossible for economic growth in the future. Can't solve water in the long term.
It's going to be, everything in order here. It is going to be case first.
What order?
It's going to start on the framework. And you're also going to need advantage 1 and advantage 2.
Do I need to overview?
I'm sorry?
Underview?
Yeah. Alright. Okay, and then we are going to go BK in order. Actually, I'm sorry. It's going to be case, new sheet of paper, K in order, counterplan net benefit.
On top of that.
Oh yeah, yeah. Top cavity is on top of it. Top cavity is on top of everything. So just go back over it. Let me set this here. Okay. It's going to go top cavity. New sheet of paper, or actually, I did case in order. I'm sorry. Then the new sheet of paper. Then the K in order. Counterplan net benefit. Does anybody need me to repeat that, or are you all good? Okay. Is everyone ready?
On top county, first argument we are a foreign policy counterinterpretation. The State Department requires us to use USAID. Or the first argument is going to be it's good for ground one. It allows you for functional engagement with IR disads, as well as that the fact that you also get better access to Venezuelan politics is that the specific counterpoint that you run specifically. Next argument is that predictability skew is inevitable. Predictability skew is inevitable. Stress skew is also inevitable. Things like infinite prep time, as well as the fact that the negative team can run anything. One probably means that reciprocity is good on this reason. Next argument is reasonability. There's literally no offense that they can read. They are operating under multiple wards. They can read a K that basically links to everything, as well as the counterplay means that there's no ground that they initially lost. Next argument is limits. We have to limit it down. One, it's resolutionality. We are abiding by the resolution means that one, we are the most critical, but we also get deeper on topic-specific education. Or arguments topic-specific education is probably better for critical education on this instance because you can cross-apply our framework how you can still run criticism, but comparing it to a political discussion allows us to solve back for your criticism. Next argument is anything else on that?
You said reasonability.
Next argument is, reasonability. Arguments can be reasonability is uniquely key on this instance. They highlight no unique around abuse means that it's a one-shot kill for the affirmative team. Probably should give some leeway. Alright. Framework. First argument, they say they get one policy action, one criticism. We have a couple of discussions to this. First off, our arguments. First off, you can extend across a couple of arguments here. That one, this to completely double turn your acts. You are a neo-colonialist act. Probably means that you don't solve back for the rest of your criticism. More importantly, and also leads to no discussion because your arguments don't jive. Their offensive arguments basically lead to a political discussion between two policies that don't interact because the two policies don't interact, as well as the fact that they contradict each other. You could probably vote them down on the movement. Now, next argument, you can extend across that. There's an infinite number of representations of their political discussion. Probably means that you should only be able to evaluate the merits on this. You can only evaluate the policy actions implemented. Extend across our framework on this instance, but also extend across the fact that a world where they do not use fiat in the world probably means there's no spillover on the K anyways, means that they shouldn't get access to the ground. Next argument, they say status quo is going to be able to sell back to this. Our argument is that current water means are good enough. You can extend across all of our inherency about why current water filtration systems are not enough. Our argument is that even if that's the case, we still are going to have better access to solving more water diseases with the plain text because we access better technology. Next argument is that you say that current currency reform is happening. Argument is going to what?
We'll get it. Just keep going.
Okay, next argument you say that currency reform is coming. We have a couple of arguments. This is just one. This just means that now is the key time for U.S. diplomacy to increase an area which we uniquely saw back. The next argument is that China probably makes this inevitable because of the debt that they owe them. Anything else, Joe?
That's not responsive to our specific Hezbollah analysis.
It's also not responsive to our specific Hezbollah analysis. Means that you can extend across the entirety of our terms on this instance. Our argument is that this would inevitably lead to extinction of the chemical warfare, which they've conceded acts faster than any of their disadvantages. You get one question. Do you want to know?
I want you to tell me why the technology of the 1AC is better than the technology that NGOs are distributing in the status quo.
Because NGOs don't have nearly enough money, you've conceded
Water
that
straws that
99.9%.
individuals
Okay,
can
Advantage one. Except across the entirety of advantage one that goes completely conceded. You have conceded there's empirics on our side. 199.9% of the waterborne illnesses can be solved. You have also conceded that disease of gonorrhea probably proves that NGOs' current water technology isn't working. Means that there's the answer to your fucking question. Next argument is impacts are this 130,000 disease that's happened in a while, and also you conceded that the most likely scenario for a superbug is on. Advantage one probably means in a world where you concede this, and there's no offense. It's why we don't solve for this. We will always outweigh disadvantage on. Advantage two, you've conceded this completely. You have conceded a number of arguments that indicate that Obama's political capital is not enough for solving the current water wars now in the world. This is true. You also have conceded that Venezuela. You also conceded that we saw back for the complete diplomacy of the entire nations in the world. Where you also concede that they'll perceive it as a specific instance of U.S. diplomacy because Venezuela has been uniquely aligned against the United States. Means that we saw back for the entirety of your diplomacy disadvantage. You don't get access to any of this. Oh, extend across the impacts here that biological warfare on Hezbollah probably leads to extinction faster than any nuclear scenario. We are controlling 100% solvency on this question. Means that we are always going to outweigh. On advantage three. Except across a couple of arguments here. First off, except across a couple of arguments here that, well, first off, it's closed doors means that your disadvantage probably never, it's closed doors means that disadvantage is never seen perceived means that there's literally no offense against case, but also except across that current candidacy on split basis. When it's back, all your Maduro arguments will have specific arguments on that instance, but in what we can see this, it proves that Maduro is inevitably going to win. Do you see the paper? Interpretation, the opposition gets right to one conditional advocacy, the opposition gets right to one conditional advocacy violation, they run two conditional advocacy standards. First argument is reciprocity, we actually get one unconditional plain text, we don't get to read two of them. You can see this probably means that you should only get one access. We still solve back for all year round because you allow you to kick out advantages by the war where you two have debates us on multiple worlds, and forces us to argue against ourselves, and also leads to a stress group because it forces us to place offense on every sheet of paper. Means that there's unique consistency, is the most important speech around because the PMR is not allowed to extend in the offense. It's not, man, the PMR probably means you should vote them down for reason. This next argument is they also don't have any solvency because the world where they operate under fiat as well as this means that they have no endorsement of a specific framework. You're going to value our framework over this because of this contradiction means that voters for priority fairness education and competing interpretations. Okay. First argument, cross-apply the entirety of our framework. This is why discourse doesn't shape policy. Our argument is just because you tell a train to stop moving probably doesn't mean it isn't going to run you over. It means that discourse doesn't shape the real world argument is that the only way that you can solve back for this is clear political vision, which we highlight through fiat. Means that any world that we can increase diplomacy as well as decrease colonialism probably is a good thing for the plan. Next argument you say is that global economic elites are happening. Our argument is that capitalism makes elitism inevitable. First off, the most powerful people, the most paid attention people in the world are probably the richest people in the world. Means that your neo-colonialist movement never goes out of the round. Next argument, you read no spillover arguments of the round and how the ballot is uniquely key. Means that you can only evaluate this on a policy implementation. Ultimately means they never give access to any of their arguments. Also, except across the currency systems and value systems are always going to be inevitable. Our argument is going to be the impression that they highlight existed before neo-colonialism was even defined. Probably means that never gets access to any of these arguments. Next argument is turn. Our argument is going to be that neoliberalism is bad because one, it increases it decreases our ability to implement policies to solve the structural issues. We just think language is too important. The problem means that we just talk about issues rather than solving. The next argument is that it also develops self-complacency because we never because we take too much credit into highlighting the language. Our argument is that we solve back for this entirely. Next argument is
Just say turn where save to save mentality.
What?
Turn where save to save mentality.
Turn where also a save to save mentality means that we're ultimately I think it's good, and we also provide a policy implementation means that we solve back for the answer increase faster. Alternative permutation. Do the alternative, but vote affirmative. Do the alternative, but vote affirmative, so don't reject the affirmative. Solvency, this is good because one, it increases discussion to your plan. This is actually the political discussion between epistemology and policy that we highlight in the plan. Means that we solve back for this better. Next argument is also we're to solve back for residual links either A. We are good enough to solve back for the entirety of this, or you never get access to you never get access to all causes. Counterpoint. Permutation, do both. Permutation twofold. First off, they're not functionally competitive. They read no arguments as to why this true means that, one, we get x to double something. Also, we solve back for the residual links in this, and next argument is that, you link to the entirety of the criticism. Any arguments if they pull into criticism problem means you can act on decay as well because they use the same felonious length. The next argument is that, conditionality means that you don't solve. Argument is that, this is not viewed as a form of diplomacy, means you never get access to the arguments anyways. Means that also, next argument is that's all we need. Counterpoint that. First off, you say that, first off, argument is going to be that, not unique of Venezuela and U.S. relations are increasing. Now, we have a few words as to why this is true. First off, you can extend across that Venezuela is an active private hub.
You should say democracy is increasing now.
Democracy is increasing now for a number of different reasons. First off, now is a key time. Now that Chavez is dead, the U.S. has actually been implementing more democracy tactics. Kerry's rhetoric is actually prioritizing democracy within Venezuela. Now, next argument is that the Prime Minister has actually initiated some reversal of U.S. policies. Auctioning off U.S. dollars proves that they are engaging in U.S. policy. Next argument's turn. We increase diplomacy when we decrease human rights abuses.
Order is T. Counterplan. Net benefit. The case, their framework page. Conditionality. The critique and order. Case, advantage 1, advantage 2, advantage 3.
Let's say over time.
Yeah. Topicality. Counterplan. Net benefit. Your first framework page on your case. Your new conditionality sheet. The critique and order starting with our framework page. Advantage 1, advantage 2, underview, advantage 3, whatever you want to call that little teeny thing. Is anyone not ready? I want T on bottom, not top.
Really?
All good?
Yep.
First argument on the counterplan, cross-by perm to both. This means that cross-by perm to both. This means there's no voter intentional competition. Being has to justify the permutation to the counterplan. This is the ability to generate offense. It's not competitive. It means you can't generate offense off the disadvantage. In addition to take the argument off the team, we're not going for it. In the case it's not a incentive figure for for you to read this. In the 2A are also no voter extended on intentional competition bad case. Use this double because we increase the equivalence logic. You're not answering our framework or arguments on the case would say that this is prioritization. You have to justify your epistemology and your method before you can prove whether or not policy actually engages to justify. This means that this gateway issue, we can't be able to justify both the methodological claims of your applicable verbal applications. If you prove the methodology flawed, we're not engaging this for something analyzing. You furthermore, I have much consistent checks on the only decay. We in MO it means we're supporting movement. Furthermore, you don't understand the way that we're in red discourse functions are alternatives based on the advocacy for the rejection of neoliberalism, which is able to create agency outside the space. The neoliberal system doesn't need to lead to spillover, it doesn't need to lead to consistency, which means that we're not looking into framework arguments. Next, you say no discussion, because the president doesn't drive off on the above, you say, go down on the movement. This isn't creating movement, we're creating the space and ontological space that exists outside of neoliberalism, which we can understand we exist within power structures. This is capable of solving back cross alternative solve to use infinite representations. This isn't sure to link to the one I see in the ways in which you do this means to link check back. You have to defend every methodological part of what I see cross on the framework space that this is unique key. This means we should be able to defend any type of discourse representation that you have you say continues to be because this thing is still over cross-by from above. Cross-by case arguments that this is the only way to engage real-world policy making.
Can you answer that we don't have a movement?
What?
That it stops our movement?
Yeah.
Okay.
Doesn't stop our movement. We'll get to that on the condo. First, I must cross-by case interpretation of the video. One condition test of Thornton's methodology and one condition test of the policy options is always going to be key for a couple of reasons. The first reason is education. A, the point is we increase both critical and policy making education, which is key to breadth of education. You need to understand the way in which multi-functions. We were going to understand the policy making function, which means that the critique is key to methodology, but this is also uniquely key to depth in the debate round because it prevents the ideas from shifting out of the discursive links that we isolate on the critique space by bringing in that critical advantage. This is the key to breadth of education and Franklin's Q, which unique to the negative team in addition to hard debate is good debate. You should have to have a strategy and time allocation in order to be able to win the debate round. Means growth and best for education. In addition, use is not reciprocal. This is true. You have multiple permutations, multiple advantages, and add-ons. In addition, you get to be first and debate as well as big last, which means the negative team should always have flexibility. In addition, you'll be burdened with the negative team's discursive affirmative, which means that we're capable of solving this through two conditional advocacies. One advocacy that is capable of solving this. Furthermore, we have unique interpretation. Why two conditional advocacies are uniquely key because of critical education. You don't have any distinction between one and two conditional advocacies. That means that you're not capable of solving this. We could also bring multiple disadvantages make times inevitable. You say that we're not solving this via this is not specific to our framework. Cross-apply. We are creating the individual movement discourse that exists within this debate round. It's capable of solving back the alternative. You say voter work stinks with the office that they read and all the other sheets of paper. Don't simply put negative on conditionality. This is always going to be key. do on multiple sheets of paper. I don't know which interpretation of theory or framework they're trying to isolate. Don't let them go for this argument in the PMR. Critique? It is garbage. Out-of-cross-flyer interpretation of a framework, this kind of space as a public space with democratic potential. This calls internally to all of their framework arguments, and all of their arguments because political debate becomes possible in a world in which groups of people are excluded from the political realm because of their economic situation and the way in which they're valued as individuals. This means we control internally to all of their framework. Furthermore, we articulate this to the key because being able to isolate and understand the way in which neoliberal functions is key to resolve these issues and increase the democratic potential of debate, use of discourse and shape policymaking because of a physical trend. What we're saying is that this discourse shapes the ways in which we view policy action as being possible. For instance, we don't, right now, we think that the only way that we can act is by solve problems is by using neoliberalism because we think that it's the only solution to the present day reality. Changing our epistemology, understanding the underpinnings of society is capable of solving this. This allows us to integrate new options into our political calculations. Using a political vision cross-line well, the only way to act political vision is globalization from below, which is our alternative. We think the individuals themselves have democratic and political potential, which is internally to our agency argument, which you can see means that you're increasing the means that your framework arguments cross internally to our value life plan, which means that you don't get an impact off everyone I see. Next, you say capitalism leads is inevitable. This isn't the neoliberalism is an issue of value systems that exist within the capitalist system, not an issue of the way in which money functions. Means that we can create agency and value life within this system by changing our value perspective. We're capable of solving the impacts of the critique. You say no spell for all gets out of the alternative. You say no currency systems inevitable cross-line law that doesn't resolve the critique. You say some turn about neoliberalism being either good or bad. I'm really not sure, and Joe or JT don't take my question. Probably really mean thing to do. In addition, we say that neoliberalism is bad. We're capable of solving this at the legal level way, and we say neoliberalism is good. You're not holding the internal link to the root to the value life argument, which we isolate as being the most important thing. Value life shapes what we view as being politically shapes how we feel impact to understand what death means. Before we can understand how standing extinction is good or not. In addition, you drop that this makes death inevitable because when people simply use objects to justify the types of violence against them, which controls the internal nature impacts. You see the highlights, the language in the critique where that the language in the political processes are unique and key because it understands how the shape functions. You say term, you say individual lives, we're going to be controlling the internal length of B or the internal length being able to solve for the root cause of the one I see. On the link debate. Overview on the links. Big mistake dropping the entire link debate. This is going to show what we control the internal link to things like water infiltration systems and water filtration systems. We say we focus on economic growth and the diplomatic engagement is simply the new front of colonialism and neoliberalism, which we engage new markets only in order to exploit their resources. This is empirically proven. Your USAID water filters go through the United States. These U.S. companies are producing them. The reason why these water filters are more expensive and NGOs can't get access to them is that because the United States are controlling their resources. This is exactly what happened with PEPFAR in Africa, where we can't get enough AIDS and HIV medication to Africa because PEPFAR insisted that we use patented drugs instead of unpatented drugs. This is the reason why these structural problems exist in the world of the status quo. Impacts. Cross-line life impact. This means that you look force value all through the corporation economic system and through the ability of individuals to engage in this. This means that political individuals are incapable of engaging with policies which turn the entire humanity. In addition to causes the internally surviving life, no reason why extinction outweighs means you always value life first because we know what life means. In addition, you drop the political mentality. You believe we have to use neoliberalism in order to solve neoliberal problems. This always justifies the exclusion of the lower classes and their exploitation, which means we justify infinite violence leads to extinction and infinite war which turns your case. Also means the United States can never gain any positive image because there's always going to be these critical theories who are pointing out the incredibly messed up ways that the United States engages internationally. Alternative. First argument, you say do the alternative vote you say do the alternative and vote affirmative. First argument is the separate side of the discourse and representations of your 1AC. You use the neoliberal discourse to understand ways which okay. This is separate out of the discourse of the 1AC as well as out of the political action of the 1AC because we're getting specific links to why your action itself is neoliberal, not just the way you're framing it. In addition, the way that you frame your 1AC is an issue of increasing the United States powers and the region itself. In instance of neoliberal co-option, both of these are all of the links become disadvantaged to the permutation in a world where you can't vote affirmative and still recognize the way in which we engage with the neoliberal institutions. We are capable of proving this through a couple of our solitary arguments. The first argument is that we as individuals are in focus of powers means that we as individuals in the debate have to understand that we have political action that exists outside of the neoliberal system. In addition, this is the internally speed of actualized agency, forcing us to use neoliberal policies in order to justify this makes us believe that they're necessary to political solutions that prevent us from actualizing or agency within the future. In addition, you drop the two permutation disadvantages that Katie raised. The first is that this makes neoliberalism worse because it masks it and allows for continual backing of neoliberalism to happen in the future. In addition, it decreases our political willingness to be able to solve these problems within the future because they think that they've already been solved. They think that giving people water solves structural violence throughout the globe. The next argument is that focusing on institutions that focal point fails because it decreases individual agency, individual power through the system, which means you're never capable of solving all internal value life argument. You say increased discourse of the plan tax, is the internal link that doesn't cross-line politics and solve. You say it still doesn't solve the residual length. Not true. Case. Advanced one. I'm reporting the internal length of the reason why the lack of water resistance, water resistance has close because of the distribution of resources and neoliberalism advocates when we're going to countries and control their water resources and then sell it back to them in bottles. In addition, on advantage two.
All right, criticism. Is everybody ready? Criticism is capable of resolving all the conflicts that create the justifications for why 1AC action is necessary, which means that the instance of the 1AC is not critical or is not an important incorporation with the alternative. It means that the only option that you have in this debate, which is the permutation, is not a viable policy option. First, let's evaluate the 1AC impacts. The 1AC impacts are not reverse causal, and the advantage impacts are not intrinsic to the resolution, which means that there are other things that can affect the ability to resolve the advantages. Look, diplomacy is not centered around the ability to solve waterborne diseases. There are several other things that can solve this, which means that in the interim between solving the raft and the actions of other state actors, we're capable of resolving this. This is why the NGO arguments lay credence to why your 1AC is not necessary. You should evaluate their impacts at a lower risk because we are prepared to solve their impacts through other means. While we are prepared to solve things like waterborne diseases, things like cholera with things like Gatorade, we're prepared to solve disease with organizations like Doctors Without Borders, but we are not prepared to solve things that exist at an individual level without an appreciation and understanding for how power is generated. Look, only individual action can overcome the way that power pervades everyday life and the economic value systems that we prescribe to individual lives, which means that only the alternative alone is capable of resolving these sorts of power claims. Look, you should evaluate the 1AC impacts at a very low probability because there is an enormous amount of estimated uncertainty in your solvency and the reversality of your action. Time frame informs probability. Our impacts are systemic and ongoing. This is why it is a problem that we can solve only through an active redirection to change our mindset to view this as important. When economic value is tied to your contribution to the economy, when your value as an individual is tied to your contribution to the economy, we need an active fracture of the mindset to be able to change that. We say that these sorts of ideas are generated at the level of the individual, which means that individual action is absolutely necessary. Institutional focus creates a mass that says that we solve the problem. Look, we say that we solve the problem of structural violence because we gave people clean water. Guess what? That does not solve other instances of violence. That does not solve other instances of maldistribution of value based on economic means alone. The criticism is capable of resolving the justifications for why the 1AC impacts happen in the first place. We continue to deprive people of clean water. We continue to pollute water under the justification that they can't do anything about it. They're not worthy of clean water because they don't contribute enough to the economy. When we use these sorts of value systems, when we prescribe people's worth as individuals to their contribution to the economy, it allows all violence to be justified against them because they are just not good enough to justify us cleaning water for them. This means that only alternative action is capable of resolving this. Also, systems of terrorism that breed fear, that create a mindset that we need to use bioweapons, is created at the value level where devaluation of an individual happens. This is a great example of the pervasiveness of neoliberalism because non-state actors do violence as a justification. They kill part of society as a necessity to save society because they determine that the economic value is prescribed at a different level based solely on contribution to the religious mindset that they prescribe to. This is an excellent example. Your 1AC outlines excellent examples of how neoliberalism creates problems, which means that the alternative can resolve the action of the 1AC as well as other actions. Look, your 1AC may be good in this instance. I don't think you're winning that argument, but even if you do win that it is good in one instance, the criticism is capable of resolving other instances similar to the 1AC in a way that the 1AC cannot, which means that we will terminally outweigh by having a more durable and more pervasive impact. The criticism is also an impact term to the 1AC. The disaster of the permutation outweighing the residual net benefit of the 1AC in every single link to the criticism is a disaster of the permutation that independently outweighs the F. We think that giving clean water solves structural violence. I don't think so. No value to life means no value to death. No impact to death. This means that we can allocate resource based on economic contribution alone, which means that your ability to engage in the system is solely based on the money in your pocket.
Case.
What order?
I won at 2.
Okay.
The critique. try to make this debate about the discourse in the debate round, but do not resolve the argument that effectively that indicates that they sever out of the representations and discourse that are engaged in neocolonialist logic. That means that they can probably sever out of our representations. They answer the permutation. If it's a permutation, do both. They fail to understand that it is a severance permutation, which indicates that we will ball on the permutation that benefits and resolve all of those links. There's no way for you to resolve this question must not be able to resolve severing out of the links. That coupled with the fact that they've conceded capitalism is never means their value to life claims are empirically not unique. There's only a risk of the case how may go to, or there's only a risk that the permutation will resolve all those links, not the case how it's advantage one. You say that NGOs solve all this back and proves that neocolonialism is bad. You do not isolate a single NGO that exists in Venezuela that's giving water trust. All of your arguments are indicative of Africa. The reason why the United States doesn't do this now is because of the perception of the United States, which we changed radically. You can see the fact that we sell this back to people there is not the result of the plan. USAID does not sell water, they give it away. That is not a coherent leak story coming out of the MOC. That's not, in fact, you can see the fact that the app obviously outweighs because it solves the most dehumanizing way to die when your body shuts down. That outweighs all the value of life because value of life is obviously worse when you're when you're dying of thirst. Advantage 2. They do not, all they say on the link page is that JT does not address the link page. They do not answer the argument, however, that advantage 2 is a link turn to the entire criticism. We are not an extension of United States neoliberalism. We've changed that policy. We've said the United States historically has been perceived as an empire. We've changed that and say that people are no longer valuable for their oil that Venezuela produces or their economic merit, but rather people are valuable in and of themselves because of water access. The United States changes that. They have literally zero ink on advantage 2. You should give us a high propensity to the link turn. If you don't buy that argument, though, we'll beat them on the permutation. Go to the framework debate. You say that it's just an interrogation of us, which is the reason why you're allowed to sever. That just means that the alternative permutation is totally justified. You said the discourse has shaped the way policies are influenced. That just means the alternative is inevitably co-opted by the discourse of the LOC. That indicates that you say neoliberalism is bad. You've conceded, however, that capitalism is inevitable, which means that all the impacts of neoliberalism killing value of life is inevitable. You conceded that capitalism will inevitably make a dichotomy of have and have-nots, which means that the impact of not having value of life is
Even if they're not a cap K, they've conceded that value systems of people.
Yeah, even if they're not a cap K, they've conceded that the terminal impact of dichotomizing people into value systems is inevitable. Permutation debate. Okay. They have 5 arguments to the permutation. The first one is it severs our representation. A subpoint is cross-applied. The LOC does this as well, which means there's no impact to that. The B subpoint is that it does not. There's no role of the ballot argument for them to generate an impact to this. All of their solvency arguments, you should look at them and analyze them very hard in your decision because all of their solvency arguments are just predicated on our changing the understanding of reality. You've jumped with the permutation. You answer the permutation as if it includes the plan text. It does not. It has the judge essentially reject the affirmative on the ballot, but vote affirmative. You have no reason why you cannot change your neoliberal understanding of reality and vote at the same time other than this discourse argument, but you've conceded you double turn that too. Your next argument is it increases United States power. No, it does not have the plan in it. You've conceded severance is fine. You said they don't have an impact to use severance or make that argument. Also, we'll just wash our hands on this question that indicates that hard debate is good debate. That's their argument. We will extend it there. You say masking. First argument is there's no warrant as to why masking is inherently worse or increases that advantage. 2 goes straight conceded, which means there's also a high risk of a link turn to this masking argument that indicates we do not do that. There's also, and the LOC is a way bigger mask. They literally come out and say neoliberalism is good, and they go out and critique it. That is way more masking than the affirmative. Save to save mentality, which is an independent, straight turn to the criticism. They do not have a compelling answer that in the POI or in the MOC. They don't address it. All they say is JT drops the link page, do not resolve the question that indicates that we're save to save mentality anyway, which means that all their discourse arguments don't make sense anyway because we're functionally no leaking out of them. You say it cripples individual agency. First argument is that the way you resolve individual agency is by rejection of the affirmative, a gesture of refusal to participate in the frontier of colonialization. Unfortunately for us, that is the top half of the permutation, which indicates we resolve all of your questions. There's no way to do that. You say that individual agency is bad, or you also say that it kills individual agency because it says that it's a state problem. It's not a state problem. The state does not even exist in the world of the permutation, which means that all you do, there's no impact to this argument. Also, there's also a risk that the alternative is masking too because of the way the PMC is or the LOC is engaged. You have anything else, JT?
Nope.
Nah, that's fine.